Montana Territory, July 1879. The saloon doors slammed open like someone had thrown a body through them, and it was nearly the truth. Vera Kline stumbled forward, her thin arms yanked by the wrist, her feet dragging across the dusty floor of the Brass Spur Saloon. She was 19, barefoot, bruised around the mouth, and her dress hung off one shoulder like it had been torn by wolves. The man hauling her was red-faced, half-drunk, and twice her size. "She's mine now," he barked, voice slurred but loud. "Paid $5 fair and square," a few men laughed. One spat. No one stood up. Luke O'Reilly had been nursing a warm beer in the corner. He had not come to town looking for a fight, but his chair scraped back across wood before he even realized he was standing. He was 28, all lean muscle and sun-browned skin, with a jaw that looked carved from stone and eyes the color of river silt. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but his gaze was steady. The drunk turned to him, still gripping Vera's arm. "You got something to say, Cowboy?" Luke's voice was low but clear. "Yeah," he said. "She's worth more than you'll ever have." The man blinked, not quite sure if he was being insulted or not. Then Luke stepped forward and the look in his eyes left no doubt. "She ain't livestock," Luke said. "You do not buy a woman." "I paid." Luke pulled a coin pouch from his coat and tossed it to the floor. "There's $20 in there. You take it and get the hell out of this town. Now." The man stared at the pouch, then at Luke's hand resting near the butt of his holstered Colt. After a moment he grunted, released Vera's arm and scooped up the pouch. "You just bought yourself trouble," the man muttered before stumbling out into the street. Luke turned to Vera. She was shaking, breathing shallow, her eyes darting around like a cornered animal. Her lip was split. Her cheek was bruised purple. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded barely. "Come on," he said, his voice gentler now. "Let's get out of here." He led her outside, keeping his body between her and the eyes watching through the saloon windows. He did not touch her again, not until she reached for his coat sleeve, holding on like she might fall apart if she let go. Luke had a small cabin about 10 miles outside of town, tucked between cottonwoods and a sleepy bend of the Musselshell River. He rode his horse while she sat in the saddle behind him, her hands gripping his coat tighter than necessary. She did not speak, and he did not ask questions. When they reached the cabin, she looked at it like it was made of gold. He helped her down and offered her water. She drank like she had been in the desert for days. Inside, he lit the lantern and stoked the fire. She sat on the edge of his bed, still silent. He brought a clean blanket and handed it to her. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "I'll sleep out by the fire." She stared at him. "Why?" "Because you need somewhere safe. I got no interest in hurting you." She swallowed hard. "What's your name, Luke O'Reilly?" "I'm Vera," she said. "Vera Kline." He nodded. "You get some rest, Vera." He stepped outside and closed the door behind him. That night he did not sleep much. The stars were bright, and the fire crackled, and he kept thinking about the way her hand had trembled when she reached for the cup of water. He had seen pain before he had fought in the war, seen men torn apart, but something about the bruises on her face made his stomach twist. The next morning she stepped out of the cabin, wearing one of his old shirts over her dress. Her hair was brushed, her face washed. She looked like someone who had not seen her own reflection in months. "I can work," she said, standing with her back straight. "I can clean, cook, whatever you need. You do not owe me anything. I do not want charity." Luke looked at her a long moment, then he nodded. "All right, you help around here as long as you need, and when you are ready I can take you anywhere you want to go." She paused. "What if I do not have anywhere?" "Then you stay," he said simply. "As long as you want." She stared at him and something behind her eyes shifted, not trust, not yet, but something close. Days passed. Vera worked from sunup to sundown cleaning the cabin, tending the small garden out back, even helping Luke with the horses. She moved with quiet purpose, always watching, always listening. Luke did not push. He gave her space, but he noticed the small things, how she started humming while she worked, how she left a plate for him on the table even when he ate late. One evening, while they were sitting on the porch watching the sun go down, Vera spoke. "My father sold me," she said. To that man. Luke did not speak, he let her talk. He drank away everything. "My mother died when I was 14. Then he found someone to pay for me, said $5 was better than nothing." Luke's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "I do not know why you helped me," she said. "Because someone should have," he said. She turned her head and looked at him. Really looked. "I was not sure people like you existed." Luke met her gaze. "You do not owe me for being decent." Vera stood, then walked to the edge of the porch, looking out over the land. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, and the wind smelled faintly of pine. "This place feels like peace," she said. Luke stood beside her. "It can be." She turned to look at him again. "Can I stay?" He nodded once. "As long as you want." She smiled, small but real. That night, she stayed inside the cabin, and for the first time, Luke slept in his own bed, not next to her, not touching her, but with her under the same roof. And something in the air had changed. Not love yet, but the start of it, like the first warm breeze before spring takes hold. The rain came 2 weeks after Vera arrived, slow and steady, soaking the earth in a hush that settled over the cabin like a quilt. The garden turned richer, dark soil breathing deep. Luke stood under the lean-to beside the barn, arms crossed, watching the drops slide off the eaves. Vera stepped out to join him, wrapping his wool coat tighter around her. He didn't look at her when he spoke. "You ever ride?" She shook her head. "Never had the chance." "You want to learn?" She hesitated, then nodded once. They waited until the weather cleared, until the ground dried enough not to suck a hoof too deep. Luke brought out a dun-colored mare named Cassie, gentle-eyed and slow to spook. Vera stood at the gate, hands curled against the rail. Luke handed her the reins. "Start with walking her. Let her get used to your voice." Vera murmured to the mare, voice low, uncertain at first. Cassie flicked an ear, then followed. Slowly, Vera straightened, her steps growing more sure. Later, when she managed to mount with Luke steadying the stirrup, she grinned, not wide but enough to show she hadn't forgotten how. Luke walked alongside her, one hand near the bridle. "You're holding your back too tight." "I don't want to fall." "You won't." "Not with me here." The mare's hooves left faint impressions in the soft earth. A meadowlark called from the fence post. Vera glanced down at Luke. "You trust animals more than people," he considered that. "They're honest. You know what they mean, even when they don't speak." She was quiet a long time. Then, "I used to keep a bird when I was little. Sparrow with a broken wing. My mother let me feed it cornmeal and water. It stayed 3 weeks, then flew off one morning before I woke." Luke looked up at her. "You miss her." "I forget her voice sometimes, but I remember the way her hands felt when she braided my hair." They circled the pasture, Cassie calm between them. By the end, Vera's legs were shaking, but she stayed on until Luke nodded and said, "That's enough for today." That night, she boiled potatoes and fried up salt pork. Luke worked the whetstone over his blade by the hearth, the soft scrape steady in the quiet. Vera set the plate in front of him and sat across the table. "You never talk about your people," she said. "Not much to say." "You got brothers," had a younger one, "killed in Tennessee, Union side." She folded her hands in her lap. "You fought," volunteered at 17, cavalry. "Thought I knew what the world was. And now I know better." They ate in silence for a while. Fire popped in the stove. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. Vera pushed her plate back. "There's a man in town," blacksmith's apprentice. He stared at me yesterday like I was filth. Luke didn't look up from his blade. He doesn't matter. Feels like I do. Luke set the knife down. You think what he sees is the truth. I think it's what most folks see. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. That man bought you, but he didn't make you, and he sure as hell didn't break you. Her throat worked like she was trying to swallow something sharp. You don't know what I've done. You think I care, you should. I don't. She stood suddenly. I'm tired. Luke didn't stop her. When the door to the back room closed, he sat a long while with the firelight flickering across his hands. The next morning, Vera was already outside when he stepped off the porch. She was scraping the last of the mud from the wagon wheels, hair tied up, sleeves rolled high. She didn't look up when he came near. You were right, she said. About the horse, you can tell what they mean even without words. He watched her for a moment, then nodded. You ready to try again? I want to ride into town. Luke's jaw tensed. You sure? She stood, brushing her hands clean. I won't hide out here forever. I need to know I can walk through that place and not feel like I'm still owned. Luke studied her face. Then I'll go with you. Vera looked at him, something proud and raw rising in her eyes. I didn't ask you to protect me. I'm not. I'm standing beside you. They left after midday, riding side by side down the narrow dirt trail through the cottonwoods. The air smelled of wet sage and horse sweat. Vera kept her chin high, though Luke saw her knuckles whiten on the reins. Town was quiet Wednesday slow. A few men dozed on porches. A child chased a dog through the alley behind the mercantile. They tied the horses near the general store. Luke rested a hand on the saddle horn, watching her. I'll be here. Vera stepped onto the boardwalk alone. She walked past the barber, past the blacksmith's awning, past the saloon where 2 weeks ago she'd been dragged like meat. She didn't pause, didn't flinch. Luke didn't follow. He stood by the horses, letting her claim each step herself. When she came back out, face pale but steady, she walked straight to him. Her voice was low. I'm ready to go. He nodded, and they rode back without speaking. That night she sat beside him on the porch as the moon crested over the spruce. She didn't say thank you. He didn't expect her to. Instead, she leaned just slightly, shoulder brushing his. Not by accident. Luke didn't move away. For the first time since he'd brought her here, she didn't pull back when the silence stretched between them. She let it settle, let it say what words hadn't yet. And in that stillness, something rooted. Quiet and deep. The sound of the river carried through the open cabin windows as July deepened. Distant, constant, like breath. The days had taken on a rhythm, quiet, steady, shaped by chores and weather and the unspoken agreement between Vera and Luke to leave each other space to heal in their own time. Still, something had started to shift. Not in what was said, but in how they lingered longer at the table after meals, how Vera stood a little closer when they worked side by side. One evening, Luke returned from repairing a broken fence post at the southern edge of the pasture and found her kneeling in the dirt behind the cabin, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hands buried in a shallow trench. She didn't look up when he approached. You planting something? Carrots, she said. The seed was buried behind the stovepipe. I figured if it's here, it ought to be used. He crouched beside her. That's good ground, they'll take. She nodded, brushing soil from her palms. I want something that's mine. Something I put in the earth and it stays. Luke reached for the water bucket and poured gently along the row she'd made. Vera watched the dark line spread, soaking into the furrow. I saw you carve something into the barn door, she said after a while. One of the beams. Looked like initials. L.O. and R.A., he said. My brother, she glanced at him. You carved him into the wood. He was steadier than I ever was. Always said if I kept running, I'd miss the good parts. I didn't listen, not till after. Vera stood, brushing her skirt against her legs. I think about him, the man who bought me. I keep wondering if I should be angry or just tired. Luke didn't answer right away. He tipped the bucket upright and set it down gently. You don't owe him your thoughts, he said finally, but if they come, let him pass through. Don't build a house for him. She looked at him for a long moment. You think I'm still broken? No, he said. I think you've been bent hard, but you didn't snap. That night she stayed out by the fire after he went in. He watched her from the window, her profile lit by orange light, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But she didn't look away from the dark either. The next day, Luke saddled the wagon for a supply run. Vera walked out carrying a folded list and handed it to him without a word. He tucked it into his coat and climbed up. You want anything from town? I want you to bring back the right nails for the coupe. The ones you always forget. He raised an eyebrow. That happened once. Twice. I kept count. He grinned, just barely. She didn't smile back, but her eyes warmed. He returned late, dust on his sleeves and the smell of horses thick on his coat. She was waiting, arms crossed, the coupe half built behind her. Got the nails, he said, holding up the bundle. Good, she said, taking them, because I wasn't building that wall twice. Later, as they nailed the last board into place, she glanced over. You always this good with your hands. Better with a saddle than a hammer, but I manage. You ever think about leaving here? He paused, lowering the hammer. Used to. Thought I'd head west, maybe California. And now, he looked at her, the soft light of evening brushing her cheek. Now I reckon I'd miss what's growing here. She didn't speak, but her fingers lingered on the edge of the chicken wire, twisting it into place slower than needed. On Sunday, rain threatened again. They stayed in, the sound of it steady on the roof, the fire warm between them. Vera sat cross-legged on the floor, carding wool into neat piles. Luke sat nearby, sharpening his draw-knife. After a while she asked, What did you dream of when you were a boy? He kept working. Land, horses, quiet. Thought I'd have a wife by now, maybe 2 kids. She looked at him. What happened? I went to war. Then I came home different. Didn't know how to be around people that hadn't seen what I'd seen. She set the wool aside. You're not hard to be around. You're the first person to say that in a long time. She rose, walked to the hearth, and stirred the coals. When she turned back, her voice was quieter. I never dreamed of anything past 16. I didn't think I'd get that far. Luke stood, setting the blade down. You've got time now. She looked up at him. Do you believe that? I wouldn't say it if I didn't. She stepped closer, close enough he could see the faint scar along her jaw he hadn't noticed before. He didn't reach for her, but he didn't step back. I don't know what I'm doing, she said. You don't have to. He saw it then the moment something loosened in her, like a rope unknotted. She exhaled, and it wasn't shaky this time. Vera reached up, her fingers brushing his chest, and he took her hand gently, just holding it there. No rush. No need for more than that. Outside, the rain eased. The river moved steady beyond the trees, and the fire inside the cabin burned low, but warm. Neither of them let go. The wheatgrass had gone golden by the time Vera found herself humming while she worked. It was a soft sound, barely audible, but Luke heard it from where he stood fixing the saddle cinch beneath the lean-to. She was on her knees by the side of the cabin, pulling purslane from between the rows of her vegetables, hair tied off her neck in a checkered scrap of cloth. He didn't interrupt. Just watched, unnoticed, until she sat back and stretched her arms behind her, eyes closed to the morning sun. Later, while she swept the cabin's floorboards, she asked, You ever been married? Luke looked up from oiling the rifle. No, why not? He considered, rubbing slow circles into the wood. Didn't meet someone who made me stop long enough to think about it. She leaned on the broom handle. And now, he looked at her only once brief. Now I'm thinking. Vera didn't answer. Just returned to sweeping, but slower now. Each motion measured. That afternoon they rode out to check the east fence near the ridge, the mare and gelding moving easy through the high grass. Vera rode ahead, reins loose in her hands, and Luke followed, letting her lead. When they reached the split rail where the post had leaned last spring, she dismounted without waiting and began inspecting the joints. "You didn't bring the cedar wedges," she said. "They're in the bag behind the saddle." She walked back, unbuckled the flap, and grabbed the pouch. "You always this disorganized?" He tipped his hat back, watching her. "You always this bossy?" She crouched, wedging the post upright with practiced care. "Only when I know I'm right." They worked in silence, save for the rustle of birds in the brush and the wind running through the cottonwoods down the slope. When the last spike was hammered in, Vera stood and dusted her hands on her skirt. "Did your brother ever come out here with you?" Luke shook his head. "We talked about it. He never made it west of Ohio." "What would he have thought of this place?" Luke knelt to gather the tools. "Would have said it was too quiet. Said I'd go mad with just the trees and stars for company." She looked toward the mountains. "I like the quiet." He stood. "Me too." They didn't mount right away. Instead, they stood side by side, watching the sun burn low over the ridge. Vera's voice came soft. "I don't want to go back." Luke didn't ask where she meant. He just waited. "I thought I'd stay until I could face the world again," she said. "But the longer I'm here, the more I think, maybe this is the world I want." Luke's voice was steady. "You don't have to decide yet." She turned toward him. "I already have." He didn't move, but something in his expression shifted, not surprise, recognition. "You sure?" She stepped closer, and the wind caught the edge of her skirt. "I want a life where I can plant something and know I'll be there to see it grow." Luke's voice was low. "Then you've got one." They rode home slow, the sun sinking behind them, shadows long across the trail. Vera's hand rested on her thigh, but once, just once, her fingers brushed the edge of his coat. He glanced over, and she didn't pull away. That night, the lantern burned low on the table while she mended a tear in the curtain. Luke sat across from her, working rawhide into a new bridle. The quiet between them was full, not empty. She stitched the last thread and set the fabric down. "Do you think people can change?" Luke didn't look up. "I think they can return to who they were before the world told them they weren't enough." Vera folded the cloth neatly. "Then I'm starting over." He stood and crossed to the hearth. When he turned, his eyes met hers and held. He didn't speak, but neither of them looked away, and in that silence something settled between them, not the beginning of something, not anymore, but the middle. The steady part. The part that holds. The wind came down from the north in late August, stirring the dry stalks in Vera's garden and carrying the scent of pine smoke from somewhere beyond the ridge. It had been a dry season, and the land showed it cracked around the edges, yellowing at the tips of the grass, even the cottonwoods quieter than usual. Luke watched the sky each morning now, eyes scanning for the first hint of autumn. Vera had grown stronger. Her hands were calloused from work, her back straighter. She had taken to walking the perimeter of the property at dusk, boots crunching over the brittle earth, her eyes sharp. Luke often stayed close behind, letting her set the pace, letting her listen to the land the way she had learned to. One morning she came in early from feeding the chickens, a folded slip of paper in her palm. "It was under the door," she said. Luke took it, unfolded it, read once, then again. His brow lowered. "It's from Sheriff Dolly. Man named Henry Grissom's back in the territory. Says he's asking around." Vera's jaw set, but she didn't speak. Luke folded the paper again, slow and careful. "You want to go? We can pack what we need and head south. Plenty of places folks don't ask questions." "I'm not running," she said. He looked at her steady. Then I'll stand beside you." That afternoon, Luke rode into town alone. Vera stayed behind, hammering up a second latch on the back door, Flower dusting her apron where she'd left the dough to rise. She didn't pace. She didn't sit. She worked, slow and measured, until she heard hooves in the yard again. Luke stepped down from the saddle, his face unreadable. "He's gone," he said. "Got on a stage east this morning. Sheriff made it clear he wasn't welcome here." "Did he try to find me?" Luke shook his head. "Didn't even say your name. Just asked if anyone's seen a girl with a scar down her cheek. Dolly told him there wasn't anyone here who fit that." Vera let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd held. "So that's it." "Far as I can tell." She nodded, then turned and leaned against the porch post. Her hands were trembling just a little. Luke didn't move toward her, not until she opened her palm and reached for him. "I thought I'd feel more. Something. You don't have to feel anything but free." "I feel tired," she said. He stepped closer. "Then rest. You've earned that." That night, as the fire crackled low, she stood near the hearth and looked at him. "I thought I came here to get back on my feet, but I think I came here to build something new." Luke brushed sawdust from his shirt and set down the block he'd been carving. "You already have." Vera stepped forward. "I want to stay, but not just as someone passing through." He stood, met her in the middle of the room. "Then don't pass through. Stay because you want a life here, with me in it." Her voice didn't shake. "I do." Luke reached out, his hand cupping the side of her face, thumb brushing the place where the scar faded into skin. "You sure?" "I've never been more." He kissed her slow, the kind of kiss that wasn't about claiming or proving, just knowing. Her arms slid around his back, and his around her waist, and for a long while, neither of them spoke. They married in September, beneath the cottonwood tree where the river curved widest. Sheriff Dolly officiated, and the blacksmith's wife brought preserves as a gift. It was simple, no lace, no music, but Vera wore a dress she'd sewn herself, and Luke had shaved clean for the first time in months. They said their vows with eyes steady, hands clasped, and no one watching doubted the truth of it. After, they shared bread and stew with neighbors who had come more out of respect than friendship. But by the end of the evening, there were stories traded and hands shaken. Luke passed around a bottle of his best rye, and Vera laughed freely, openly in a way no one could recall hearing before. That night, as they lay beneath the quilt she'd pieced together over the summer, Luke traced the curve of her shoulder with his fingers. "You sure you're ready for this life?" Vera turned to him, eyes soft. "I'm not afraid of the work, or the stillness, or the years." He folded his hand over hers. "Then we got everything we need." By the time the first snow came, Vera's carrots were pulled and stored in the root cellar. The coop was full and warm, and the cabin had a second chair by the fire Luke had carved from pine. Vera had taken to writing in the evening small notes, memories, things she didn't want to forget now that she didn't have to run from them. They didn't speak often of the past. It didn't need to be said. It was there in how they moved around each other, how his hand always found hers when the wind howled too loud, how she left the light burning when he rode out late and kept the hearth warm till he returned. In the spring, she planted more rows. Beans this time, and tomatoes. Luke built her a bench beneath the cottonwood, and they sat there often, sometimes in silence, sometimes with stories. They watched the river rise and fall, the sky stretch wide, and the land grow into something that belonged to both of them. And on the days when the world felt too quiet, Vera would hum again the sound of someone who had come through the dark and found not just safety but a place to belong. Their life wasn't loud. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs, steady as the river, strong as the roots they put down together. And it held, always,